David Thompson looked at his watch and sighed. It was only Tuesday afternoon, and the week already felt too long. He sat at his desk in First National Bank, tapping his pen against a stack of papers. The bank was quiet today, with only a few customers walking around. David liked it that way. Less work meant more time to check his phone and plan his weekend. He had worked at the bank for 5 years now. In that time, he had reviewed hundreds of loan applications. Some he approved, some he rejected. David thought he was good at his job. He could look at a person and know right away if they were serious about business or just dreaming. At least that is what he told himself. The glass door opened and David looked up briefly. A young black woman walked in wearing jeans and a simple sweater. She carried a backpack over one shoulder and looked around the bank like she was not sure where to go. David watched her for a moment and then looked back down at his computer screen. Probably another college student looking to open a basic account, he thought. But the woman walked straight to his desk. She smiled politely and said hello. David looked up again, trying not to show his annoyance. He had other things to do, and he did not want to spend his afternoon on something simple. "Can I help you?" David asked, his voice flat and uninterested. "Yes, I hope so," the woman said. "My name is Maya. I am here to apply for a small business loan." David raised his eyebrows. "A business loan?" He looked at her again, taking in her casual clothes and young face. She could not be more than 25 years old. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "A business loan," he repeated slowly. "What kind of business?" "I run a tech startup," Maya explained. "We create software solutions for small businesses. We have been operating for 2 years now, and we are ready to expand. I need funding to hire more developers and open a proper office." David nodded, but he was not really listening. Tech startup. He had heard that phrase 1,000 times before. Everyone thought they could build the next big app and become a millionaire. Most of them failed within the first year. He glanced at Maya again and made up his mind quickly. "Look," David said, pulling out a blank application form without much care. "Business loans are complicated. They require a lot of documentation, good credit history, and proven revenue. Most startups do not qualify, especially in the first few years." Maya nodded. "I understand that. I brought all my financial documents with me. Our company has been profitable for the last 18 months. I also have my personal credit report and bank statements." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a neat folder. David took it but did not open it. He placed it on his desk and looked at Maya with what he thought was a patient expression. "Even with documents, there are other factors we consider," David said. "Do you have collateral? Property, investments, anything valuable we could use as security?" "I have some savings and investment accounts," Maya replied. "Everything is in the folder. I also own my car outright, and I have stocks in several companies." David barely glanced at the folder. He had already decided that this was not worth his time. He had a feeling about these things, and his feeling told him that this young woman was not ready for a serious business loan. She probably had a small website and a few clients, nothing more. "How much experience do you have in running a business?" David asked, his tone making it clear he doubted she had any. "I started my first company when I was 21, Maya said calmly. "It was a smaller project, but it taught me a lot. My current company has 12 employees and we work with over 50 clients across 3 states. David shook his head slightly. 12 employees is still very small. Banks prefer to work with established businesses that have been around for at least 5 years. 2 years is not enough time to prove stability. But we have consistent revenue growth," Maya said, keeping her voice polite but firm. "Our profit margins are strong and we have contracts lined up for the next year." "Is not that what matters?" David sighed like he was talking to a child. "Look, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but running a business is harder than you think. Tech companies especially are risky. Most of them fail. The bank cannot take that kind of risk with our money." Maya studied him for a moment. "Have you looked at my application yet? My financial records show that we are not a risky investment." "I do not need to look at every detail to know what the answer will be," David said, pushing the folder back toward her slightly. "My advice? Start smaller. Maybe try a personal loan for a few $1,000s. Use that to grow slowly. Once you have a more established track record, come back and we can talk again." Maya did not pick up the folder right away. "What would I need to qualify?" "Specifically?" David listed off several requirements, making each one sound impossible. Higher revenue numbers, longer business history, more collateral, better credit scores than most people could ever achieve. He threw out numbers and terms without really thinking about whether they made sense. Maya listened carefully to everything he said. She asked a few more questions about interest rates and repayment terms. David answered quickly, wanting this conversation to end. He glanced at his computer screen several times, making it obvious he had other things to do. Finally, Maya picked up her folder and stood up. "Thank you for your time," she said quietly. David nodded. "Good luck with your business. Maybe try some of the online lending companies. They might be more flexible." Maya smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "I will consider all my options." She walked away from his desk and out of the bank. David watched her go and then immediately forgot about her. He opened his email and started planning where he would go for lunch. Another dreamer sent away, he thought. He was doing her a favor, really. Better she learn now that business was serious work, not something for amateurs. David never opened the folder Maya had left on his desk for those few minutes. He never saw the impressive financial statements inside, the letters from satisfied clients, or the detailed business plan. He had judged everything he needed to judge just by looking at her. He had no idea that this decision would change everything. The next morning, David arrived at the bank at his usual time. He parked his car in the employee lot and walked inside through the back entrance. The bank would not open to customers for another 30 minutes, so David expected the usual quiet morning routine. Coffee in the break room, check his emails, maybe chat with a coworker about last night's game. But something was different today. As soon as he walked through the door, he noticed people gathered in small groups, whispering. His coworker, Jennifer, rushed past him looking worried. Another employee, Tom, stood by the copy machine staring at his phone with wide eyes. "What is going on?" David asked Tom. Tom looked up. "You did not get the email? We have an emergency meeting in 15 minutes. Everyone has to attend." David frowned and pulled out his phone. Sure enough, there was an email sent late last night from the regional manager. The subject line read, "Mandatory staff meeting. Important announcement." David's stomach tightened a little. Emergency meetings were never good news. He poured himself a cup of coffee and joined the other employees slowly gathering in the main conference room. Nobody knew what was happening, but everyone had theories. Were they closing the branch? Were there layoffs coming? David had heard rumors that some banks in the area were struggling, but he thought First National was doing fine. The conference room filled up quickly. All 20 employees from the branch squeezed inside, some sitting at the long table while others stood against the walls. The mood was tense. People checked their phones nervously or whispered to the person next to them. David found a seat near the middle of the table and tried to look calm, even though his heart was beating faster than usual. At exactly 9 o'clock, Mr. Peterson walked in. He was the regional manager who oversaw 5 bank branches in the area. Mr. Peterson was usually cheerful and friendly, but today his face was serious. He carried a leather folder and walked to the front of the room without smiling or greeting anyone. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Mr. Peterson began. "I know you are all wondering why I called this meeting. I have important news that affects everyone in this room." The room went completely silent. David could hear someone breathing heavily behind him. Mr. Peterson continued. "As of yesterday evening, First National Bank has been acquired by a private investment firm. This branch, along with 4 others in our region, now belongs to Phoenix Capital Group." Shocked gasps filled the room. Someone said, "What?" out loud. David felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Acquired? How was that possible? Nobody had said anything about the bank being for sale. "I know this is surprising," Mr. Peterson said, raising his hand to calm everyone down. "Let me explain. First National has been facing financial difficulties for the past year. The board of directors decided that the best option was to accept an acquisition offer rather than risk closing branches. Phoenix Capital Group specializes in buying struggling banks and turning them around." "What does this mean for our jobs?" Jennifer asked, her voice shaking. "That is a fair question," Mr. Peterson replied. "Phoenix Capital has assured us that they do not plan any immediate layoffs. They want to meet with each of you, review our operations, and then make decisions about the future. Some positions may change, but they are committed to keeping this branch open and working with the existing staff. David felt a tiny bit of relief, but he was still worried. New ownership meant new rules, new expectations, maybe new managers who would judge his work differently. He had been comfortable at First National. He knew how things worked, knew what was expected of him. Change was not something David liked. "Who are these people?" Tom asked. "Phoenix Capital Group? I never heard of them." Mr. Peterson nodded. "They are relatively new but very successful. They have acquired and saved over 20 banks in the past 5 years. They focus on community banking and supporting local businesses. Their track record is actually quite impressive." "When do we meet them?" another employee asked. "Today," Mr. Peterson said, and the room erupted in whispers again. "The owner and CEO of Phoenix Capital Group is visiting this morning to meet all of you and tour the facility. She will be here in about 30 minutes. She. So the owner was a woman. David found that interesting, but did not think much of it. He was more worried about making a good impression. He mentally reviewed his recent work performance. His loan approval numbers were strong. He had not made any major mistakes lately. He should be fine, he told himself. Mr. Peterson spent the next 20 minutes explaining more details about the acquisition. He talked about contracts, transition periods, and new policies that might come. David tried to pay attention, but his mind kept wandering. He thought about his mortgage payment, his car loan, all the bills he had to pay. He could not afford to lose this job. "Does anyone have questions?" Mr. Peterson finally asked. Several hands went up. People asked about benefits, vacation time, salary changes. Mr. Peterson answered what he could, but he admitted he did not have all the information yet. The new owner would explain more when she arrived. David looked at his watch. Almost time. He wondered what this CEO would be like. Probably some older businesswoman in an expensive suit who would walk through the branch, shake a few hands, and then disappear back to wherever rich people spent their time. These types of visits were usually quick and meaningless. "One more thing," Mr. Peterson said as people started to stand up. "I want everyone to understand that Phoenix Capital Group is known for being very thorough. They will review everything. Loan files, customer service records, employee performance, all of it. They want to understand exactly how we operate and where we can improve." David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Review everything? That sounded intense, but he told himself again that he had nothing to worry about. His numbers were good. He did his job well. "The CEO will be here soon," Mr. Peterson continued. "I expect everyone to be professional and welcoming. This is a chance for us to show what we do well and prove that this branch is worth keeping. Understand?" Everyone nodded. People slowly filed out of the conference room, talking quietly among themselves. David went back to his desk and tried to work, but he could not focus. He kept watching the front door, waiting for this mysterious CEO to arrive. Other employees were doing the same thing. Jennifer cleaned her desk nervously. Tom checked his tie in the reflection of his computer screen. Everyone wanted to look busy and professional. David opened a loan application file on his computer and pretended to read it. His mind was racing with thoughts. What if the new owner did not like him? What if they wanted to replace the whole loan department? What if they found mistakes in his files? He told himself to calm down. He had survived changes before. He would survive this one too. But deep down, David felt that something big was about to happen. He could not explain it, but there was a strange feeling in the air that morning, like everything was about to change. He had no idea how right he was. David sat at his desk trying to look busy, but his eyes kept moving to the front entrance of the bank. Around him, his coworkers were doing the same thing. Everyone was waiting. The clock on the wall showed 9:45 in the morning. Mr. Peterson had said the new owner would arrive around 9:30, but there was no sign of anyone yet. Jennifer walked past David's desk for the third time, straightening papers that did not need to be straightened. Tom kept adjusting his computer monitor even though it was already in the perfect position. The whole bank felt like it was holding its breath. Then at 9:52, a black car pulled up outside. Everyone noticed. People sat up straighter in their chairs. Someone whispered, "She's here." The driver's door opened first and a professional-looking man in a suit stepped out. He walked around to the passenger side and opened that door. A woman stepped out and David's heart stopped. It was Maya, but she looked completely different from yesterday. Gone were the jeans and casual sweater. Today she wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit that looked expensive. Her hair was styled professionally. She carried a leather briefcase and moved with complete confidence. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a business magazine. David felt his face go cold. No, it could not be the same person. Maybe he was mistaken. Maybe this was just someone who looked like the woman from yesterday. But as she walked through the door, David knew. It was definitely her. The same face, the same eyes, just dressed very differently. Mr. Peterson rushed to greet her with a big smile. "Miss Chen, welcome to our branch. We are so glad to have you here." Chen. Her last name was Chen. David's mind was racing. This could not be happening. The woman he had dismissed yesterday, the woman whose loan application he had barely looked at, was now the owner of the entire bank. Maya shook Mr. Peterson's hand and smiled warmly. "Thank you. I'm excited to be here and meet everyone." Her voice was the same, calm and professional. David wanted to disappear under his desk. He felt sick to his stomach. "Let me introduce you to the team," Mr. Peterson said, gesturing toward the employees who had gathered near the front. "Everyone, this is Maya Chen, founder and CEO of Phoenix Capital Group. She now owns this bank and 4 others in our region." People clapped politely. Maya smiled at everyone, her eyes moving from face to face. When her gaze reached David, she paused for just a second. Her expression did not change, but David saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition. She knew who he was. She remembered him. David felt sweat forming on his forehead. He tried to smile, tried to look normal, but he was sure everyone could see the panic on his face. "Thank you all for being here," Maya said, addressing the whole room. "I know this change is sudden, and I know you probably have many questions. Let me start by telling you a little about Phoenix Capital Group and why we do what we do." She spoke clearly and confidently, like someone who had given this speech many times before. She explained that her company focused on saving banks that were struggling, keeping them open and making them stronger. She talked about community banking, about serving local customers, about helping small businesses grow. As she spoke, David realized how badly he had misjudged her. This was not some amateur with a small website. This was a serious businesswoman who owned multiple banks, who had enough money to buy struggling financial institutions. He had treated her like she knew nothing, and all along she had known everything. "I believe banks should serve everyone in the community," Maya continued. "Not just wealthy customers or big corporations. Small businesses, new entrepreneurs, people who are just starting out, they all deserve a fair chance. That is what Phoenix Capital Group stands for." Several employees nodded in agreement. David just sat frozen at his desk. "Over the next few weeks, I will be reviewing all aspects of how this bank operates," Maya said. "I want to understand your processes, your policies, how you serve customers. I will be looking at loan applications, account management, customer service, everything. My goal is not to criticize, but to learn and to help make this bank better." The words loan applications hit David like a hammer. She was going to review loan applications, which meant she might see how he handled applications, which meant she would definitely see how he handled her application. He was in serious trouble. "I also want to meet with each of you individually," Maya added. "I want to hear your ideas, your concerns, what you think works well and what needs improvement. Your experience and knowledge are valuable. This is your bank too, and I want your input." She answered a few questions from employees about benefits and schedules. She was patient and kind with her answers, making sure everyone understood. David could see that people were starting to relax around her. She was not some scary corporate boss. She seemed genuinely nice, which somehow made David feel even worse. After the general meeting, Mr. Peterson offered to give Maya a tour of the bank. She agreed, and the group began walking through different departments. When they reached the loan department, David's stomach dropped again. "This is our loan department," Mr. Peterson said proudly. "We handle personal loans, business loans, mortgages, everything." Maya looked around the area with interest. Her eyes landed on David's desk, and she walked over. David stood up quickly, nearly knocking over his coffee cup. "And you are?" Maya asked, even though David knew she remembered exactly who he was. "David Thompson," he managed to say. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. "I am a loan officer." Nice to meet you, David, Maya said, extending her hand. David shook it. Her grip was firm and professional. She looked him directly in the eyes, and David felt like she could see right through him. What types of loans do you handle? She asked. All types, David said. Personal auto business. Whatever customers need. Business loans, Maya repeated, and David swore he saw the tiniest hint of a smile on her face. That must be interesting work. Do you get many applications from small businesses and startups? David felt like he was standing in front of a judge. Some, he said carefully. Not as many as personal loans, but we get a few. And how do you evaluate those applications? Maya asked. Her tone was casual, just making conversation. But David knew this was not a simple question. We look at financial records, business history, credit scores, collateral, David said, repeating the things he had told Maya yesterday. The words felt hollow now. Sounds thorough, Maya said. She looked at the papers on his desk, at his computer screen, taking in everything. Then she looked back at him. I am sure we will talk more later. I'm very interested in understanding how the loan approval process works here. It was not a threat. Her voice was still friendly, but David heard the message clearly. She was going to investigate. She was going to find out exactly how he did his job. Of course, David said weakly.
Happy to explain anything. Maya smiled and moved on to meet other employees.
David sat back down in his chair and put his head in his hands. He felt like his whole world was falling apart. How could this have happened? What were the chances that the woman he had dismissed so rudely yesterday would turn out to be the CEO who now owned his bank? It seemed impossible, like something from a movie, but it was real. And now David had to face the consequences of his actions. He thought about yesterday, about how he had barely looked at her application, how he had talked down to her, how he had judged her just by her appearance and age. He had been so confident, so sure that he was right. He had never been more wrong about anything in his life. The days following Maya's first visit felt like the longest days of David's life. She did not come back to the bank right away, but her presence was everywhere. She had a team of people who showed up to review files, interview employees, and examine every detail of how the bank operated. David tried to act normal, but inside he was terrified. Every time someone from Maya's team asked to see loan files, his heart raced. Every time Mr. Peterson called someone into his office for a private meeting, David wondered if he would be next. The other employees seemed mostly calm. Some were even excited about the changes. Maya had promised better technology, improved training, and new programs to help the community. People talked about how professional she seemed, how smart she was, how lucky they were that someone like her had bought the bank instead of a bigger corporation that might have closed their branch. David stayed quiet during these conversations. He smiled and nodded when he had to, but he could not share their excitement. He knew something they did not know. He knew he had made a terrible mistake, and sooner or later Maya would deal with it. On Thursday morning, David arrived at work to find a woman from Maya's team sitting at an empty desk near the loan department. Her name was Rachel, and she introduced herself as a financial analyst. She explained that she would be spending the week reviewing loan applications to understand approval patterns. David's hands went cold. Approval patterns. That meant she would be looking at every loan he had approved or denied in the past months, maybe even the past year. I'll need to see your recent files, Rachel said politely. Just standard review. Nothing to worry about. But David was worried, very worried. He pulled up his computer records and showed Rachel how to access the loan database. She thanked him and got to work opening files and taking notes. David tried to focus on his own work, but he kept glancing over at Rachel. What was she seeing? What was she writing down? Hours passed slowly. Rachel worked steadily, moving from file to file, occasionally asking David questions about specific applications. Most of her questions were normal. Why did this loan get approved? Why was that one denied? What documentation was missing? David answered carefully, trying to sound confident. Then Rachel opened a file and paused. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then checked something else on her laptop. She made a note, then looked at another file. And another. David felt like he was waiting for a bomb to explode. Rachel did not say anything that day. She finished her work, thanked David for his cooperation, and left. But David could tell she had found something. The way she looked at him as she left, there was a question in her eyes. The next day, Maya herself came back to the bank. She went straight to Mr. Peterson's office and they talked behind closed doors for over an hour. Through the glass walls, David could see them looking at a laptop, pointing at the screen, having what looked like a serious conversation. When the meeting ended, Mr. Peterson looked troubled. He called David into his office. "Have a seat, David," Mr. Peterson said. His friendly tone from before was gone. Now he sounded formal and distant. David sat down, his stomach in knots. "Maya's team has been reviewing our loan approval records," Mr. Peterson began. "They found some concerning patterns. Specifically, they noticed that your rejection rate for certain types of applicants is significantly higher than other loan officers in this bank and in other branches." David opened his mouth, but no words came out. Mr. Peterson continued. "Minority applicants, Black, Hispanic, Asian, you deny them at nearly twice the rate of white applicants, even when their financial qualifications are similar or sometimes better." "I don't think David started to say. "The numbers don't lie, David," Mr. Peterson interrupted. "Maya's team ran a complete analysis. They compared your decisions to 3 other loan officers here and to officers at other branches. You are the outlier, significantly." David felt sick. He wanted to argue, to explain, to say it was just a coincidence. But he could not find the words. "There's more," Mr. Peterson said quietly. "Maya herself submitted a loan application here earlier this week. She did it as a test. She came in dressed casually, using only her first name to see how she would be treated." David's face went completely white. He knew what was coming next. "You were the loan officer who saw her," Mr. Peterson said. "And according to her report, you dismissed her application immediately without reviewing her documents. You told her she wasn't qualified, that she should start smaller, that the bank couldn't take a risk on her." "I didn't know," David tried to say. "That's exactly the point," Mr. Peterson said, his voice hard. "You didn't know who she was. You made assumptions based on what? Her age, her appearance? The fact that she's Asian? You judged her before you even looked at her qualifications." David could not speak. Everything Mr. Peterson was saying was true, and there was no way to defend it. "Do you know what was in that application?" Mr. Peterson asked. "Maya has a master's degree from Harvard Business School. She sold her first tech company for $15 million. She has investments worth more than this entire bank. She has perfect credit and more collateral than 99% of the people who walk through that door. And you told her she wasn't qualified." The silence in the office was crushing. "Maya tested 12 of her newly acquired banks," Mr. Peterson continued. "She submitted identical applications at each one. 11 banks either approved her immediately or asked for standard additional documentation. Only one bank rejected her outright without even looking at her materials. This bank, you." David put his head in his hands. He felt like he might throw up. "She wants to meet with you," Mr. Peterson said. "Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. In private. I suggest you think carefully tonight about what you want to say to her." David nodded slowly. He could not look at Mr. Peterson's face. "You can go," Mr. Peterson said. "But David, I've known you for 5 years. I thought you were better than this. I'm very disappointed." David stood up and walked out of the office. He felt like everyone was staring at him, even though most people were focused on their own work. He gathered his things, told someone he was feeling sick, and left the bank early. He drove home in a daze. His mind was spinning with thoughts. How had he not seen his own bias? How many people had he treated unfairly without even realizing it? How many qualified applicants had he turned away because of assumptions and prejudice? That night, David barely slept. He kept thinking about Maya's face when he had dismissed her. She had stayed calm and polite, even when he was being condescending and rude. She had asked good questions, tried to understand what she needed to qualify. And he had brushed her off like she was wasting his time. Now she owned his bank. Now she had the power to fire him, to ruin his career, to make sure everyone knew what he had done. And honestly, David thought, she would be right to do it. He had judged her unfairly. He had let his biases control his decisions. He had hurt people without even knowing it, and probably for a long time. The next morning, David arrived at the bank 15 minutes early. He wore his best suit and tie, though he knew it would not make any difference. Maya was already there, waiting in the small conference room. Rachel, the analyst, was with her. "Good morning, David," Maya said calmly. "Please sit down." David sat. His hands were shaking slightly, so he put them under the table. Maya opened a folder filled with papers. David recognized them as loan applications. His loan applications? I think we need to have a very serious conversation, Maya said. Don't you? David sat across from Maya in the small conference room. The walls felt like they were closing in on him. Rachel, the financial analyst, sat beside Maya with a laptop open in front of her. On the table between them was a stack of papers at least 2 inches thick. Maya looked at David for a long moment before speaking. Her face showed no anger, no satisfaction at catching him. She just looked tired and disappointed. Do you know why I do what I do? Maya asked quietly. Why I buy struggling banks and try to save them? David shook his head. His throat felt too tight to speak. When I was 19 years old, I started my first business, Maya said. It was small, just a website design service. But I worked hard, got clients, made money. After a year, I wanted to expand. I needed a loan for better equipment and to hire an assistant. So I went to a bank. She paused, looking at the papers on the table. The loan officer barely looked at my application. He told me I was too young, too inexperienced, that my business was not serious enough. He said I should get a real job and stop dreaming. I went to 3 more banks, same response at each one. Nobody would give me a chance. David felt his face burning with shame. He knew exactly where this story was going. Finally, a small community bank gave me a loan, Maya continued. It was run by an older black man who had faced discrimination himself when he was starting out. He looked at my numbers, saw that I had a good plan and took a chance on me. That loan changed my life. She opened the folder in front of her and pulled out several documents. I sold that first company for $800,000 when I was 23. I used that money to start a bigger tech company. Sold that one for $15 million when I was 27. I used some of that money to get my MBA from Harvard. The rest I invested carefully. Now I have enough money to buy banks and help other people get the chances I almost didn't get. Maya looked directly at David. That is why I tested my new banks. I needed to know if they were really serving everyone in the community or just the people who looked a certain way. She pulled out a document and slid it across the table to David. It was her loan application, the one she had submitted to him. Tell me what you see when you look at this, Maya said. David picked up the paper with shaking hands. He forced himself to actually read it this time. Business revenue of $800,000 per year. Profit margin of 32%. Perfect credit score of 815. Investment portfolio worth over $2 million. Letters of recommendation from 3 major clients. A detailed business plan showing clear growth strategy. It was one of the strongest applications David had ever seen. I see an excellent applicant, David said quietly. Someone who should have been approved immediately. But you did not approve me, Maya said. You did not even look at these papers. Why? David wanted to lie, to make excuses, to blame anything but himself. But he could not. The truth was sitting right in front of him. I made assumptions, David said, his voice barely above a whisper. I saw you dressed casually, saw how young you were, and I assumed you were not serious. I did not think you could have real qualifications. I was wrong, completely wrong. Did my race have anything to do with your assumptions? Maya asked. The question was direct but not angry. David wanted to say no. He wanted to believe he was not that kind of person. But the evidence was right there in front of him. I don't know, David said honestly. I didn't think so. I never thought of myself as racist or biased, but the numbers Rachel found, they show a pattern I didn't even know was there. Rachel turned her laptop to face David. On the screen was a chart showing his loan approval and denial rates broken down by race. White applicants with a credit score between 650 and 700, Rachel explained, pointing at the screen. You approved 68%. Black applicants with the same score range, you approved only 31%. Hispanic applicants, 35%. Asian applicants, 42%. The numbers were damning. It gets worse when we look at business loans specifically, Rachel continued, clicking to another chart. For startup business loans, You approved 74% of white applicants, but only 19% of black applicants. Some of the black applicants you denied had better financial profiles than white applicants you approved. David felt like he was going to be sick. He had done this. All of it. And he had not even realized it. How many people did I turn away? David asked quietly. How many qualified people? In the past year alone? At least 47, Rachel said. 47 people who should have gotten loans but didn't because of your biased decisions. David put his head in his hands. 47 people. 47 dreams delayed or destroyed. 47 businesses that might never start. All because of him. I'm sorry, David said. The words felt completely inadequate. I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to say. Sorry is a start, Maya said. But it does not fix what you did. It does not help the people you turned away. Some of them gave up on their dreams. Some went to predatory lenders and got trapped in bad loans with terrible interest rates. Some are still struggling because they could not get the funding they deserved. The silence in the room was heavy. I could fire you, Maya said. In fact, most people would say I should. You violated fair lending laws. You discriminated against protected classes. You cost this bank money by turning away good applicants. You hurt the community we are supposed to serve. David nodded. He knew all of this was true. But firing you does not really solve anything. Maya continued. You would just go work at another bank and do the same thing. Maybe you would be more careful, but the bias would still be there, hidden under the surface. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. So I am going to give you a choice, David. You can resign right now today with a neutral reference. You walk away and we never speak again. Or you can stay and do the hard work of fixing yourself and fixing the harm you caused. David looked up in surprise. Stay? If you stay, here is what happens, Maya said firmly. First, you will undergo intensive training on unconscious bias, fair lending practices, and cultural competency. This is not a one-day workshop. This is serious education that will take months. You will read books, attend sessions, do exercises, really examine your own thinking. She counted on her fingers as she listed more requirements. Second, you will be reassigned. For the next year, you will work exclusively with minority-owned small businesses. You will help them with applications, guide them through the process, be their advocate. You will see their humanity, hear their stories, understand what they face. Third, you will personally reach out to every applicant you denied in the past year. You will offer them a new fair review of their applications. If they qualified and you turned them away unfairly, you will apologize and help them get the loan they deserved. Fourth, your performance will be monitored constantly. Rachel will review every loan decision you make. If you slip back into old patterns, if the bias shows up again, you are done. No second chances. Maya sat back in her chair. It will be hard work, David. Humbling work. You will have to face your own mistakes over and over. You will have to hear how you hurt people. You will have to change the way you think. It would be easier to just quit and move on. David thought about it. Both options were terrible. If he quit, he would always know he ran away from what he did. If he stayed, he would face his mistakes every single day. Why would you give me this chance? David asked. After what I did to you, after everything your analysis found, why not just fire me? Maya was quiet for a moment. Because the banker who helped me when I was 19 gave me a second chance when nobody else would. He saw potential in me that others missed. Maybe I can do the same for you. Maybe you can learn and grow and become someone who helps people instead of hurting them. She stood up, signaling the meeting was over. You have until tomorrow morning to decide, Maya said. Think carefully. This is not just about keeping your job. This is about what kind of person you want to be. David stood up on shaky legs. He nodded to Maya and Rachel and walked out of the conference room. He had a lot of thinking to do. David drove home from work that day with Maya's words echoing in his mind. He had until tomorrow morning to make his choice. Quit and walk away or stay and face everything he had done wrong. When he got home, his wife Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner. She took one look at his face and knew something was seriously wrong. "What happened?" she asked, putting down the knife she was using to cut vegetables. David sat at the kitchen table and told her everything. About Maya, about the test application, about the analysis that showed his bias, about all the people he had turned away. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with every detail. When he finished, Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something David did not expect. "I think I knew," she said softly. "What?" "Not the specifics," Sarah explained. "But sometimes when you talked about work, about applicants, I heard things in your voice. Little judgments. Quick decisions about people before you really knew them. I told myself I was imagining it, but maybe I wasn't." David felt like she had punched him in the stomach. Even his own wife had noticed. "What should I do?" David asked. Sarah sat down across from him. "That's not for me to decide. But I'll tell you this, I didn't marry a coward. If you quit and run away, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. You'll always wonder if you could have been better." That night, David could not sleep. He kept thinking about Maya's offer. The training, the reassignment, the monitoring, having to contact all those people he had rejected. It sounded horrible, humiliating, but quitting sounded worse. Around 3 in the morning, David got out of bed and went to his home office. He opened his laptop and started looking up some of the people he had denied loans to. It was not hard to find them. Many had tried to leave reviews on the bank's website, though those reviews were never published. One man had written, "I had perfect credit and a solid business plan, but they said I wasn't qualified. I don't know what else I could have done." Another woman wrote, "I felt like the loan officer had already decided no before I even sat down. He barely looked at my application." There were dozens of reviews like this, people who felt dismissed, disrespected, judged unfairly. David recognized several names as people he had personally turned down. He had done this. All of it. David spent the rest of the night reading about unconscious bias, about how good people could do harmful things without meaning to, about how privilege made some people blind to others' experiences. It was painful reading. He saw himself on every page. When the sun came up, David had made his decision. He got dressed in his suit and drove to the bank early. Maya's car was already in the parking lot. She was an early riser, apparently. David took a deep breath and walked inside. Maya was in the conference room working on her laptop. She looked up when David knocked on the doorframe. "Come in," she said. David stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "I want to stay," he said. "I want to do the work. All of it." Maya studied his face for a long moment. "This is not going to be easy, David. You are going to feel uncomfortable, challenged, sometimes angry." "Are you sure you can handle it?" "No," David said honestly. "I'm not sure, but I need to try. I need to be better than I was." Maya nodded slowly. "Okay, we start today. Rachel has already prepared a list of training materials for you. You will spend the next 2 weeks going through them, reading, watching videos, doing exercises. After that, we will begin the reassignment process." She handed David a thick folder. Inside were books, articles, worksheets. The titles jumped out at him. Understanding Unconscious Bias, Fair Lending Practices, Cultural Competency in Banking. "There's something else," Maya said. "Before you start working with new clients, you need to make those phone calls. Contact the people you denied. It needs to happen this week." David's stomach dropped. "This week?" "The longer you wait, the harder it gets," Maya said. "And those people deserve to hear from you as soon as possible. Some of them are still trying to get loans. Some might still need your help." She pulled out another document, a list of names, phone numbers, and dates. David recognized it as his rejected applications from the past year. "Start from the top," Maya instructed. "Call each person. Explain that the bank is doing a review of past decisions. Tell them you would like to look at their application again with fresh eyes. If they are interested, set up a meeting. If they are angry or don't want to talk to you, accept that with grace." David looked at the list. 47 names. 47 conversations he did not want to have. "What if they yell at me?" David asked quietly. "Then you listen," Maya said simply. "You let them express their frustration. You do not get defensive. You do not make excuses. You take responsibility for your mistakes." She stood up and walked to the door, then turned back to face David. "One more thing. Every Friday afternoon, you and I will meet. You will tell me what you learned that week, What challenged you, what you are struggling with. This is not a punishment, David. This is an opportunity to grow. But you have to be honest with me and with yourself. David nodded. I understand. Over the next 2 weeks, David did something he had never really done before. He educated himself. He read every book and article Maya had given him. He watched training videos on bias and discrimination. He took online courses about fair lending. The material was eye-opening and uncomfortable. David learned about redlining, about how banks had historically discriminated against minority communities. He learned about microaggressions, about stereotype threat, about all the subtle ways bias showed up in everyday decisions. He learned that bias was not always intentional. Good people could have biased thoughts. The key was recognizing those thoughts and not letting them control your actions. David also learned about his own privilege. As a white man, he had never had to think about whether people would judge him by his race when he applied for a loan, or a job, or an apartment. He had assumed his experiences were universal, but they were not. The hardest part was making the phone calls. David started on Monday morning of his second week. His hands were shaking as he dialed the first number. A man answered. Hello?
Hi, is this James Mitchell?
David asked. Yes, who is this? My name is David Thompson. I'm a loan officer at First National Bank. You applied for a business loan with us about 8 months ago. There was a long pause. I remember. You turned me down. Yes, David said. And I'm calling because we are reviewing that decision. I would like to look at your application again, with a fresh perspective. Would you be willing to meet with me? Another pause. Why should I? I went somewhere else. Got my loan approved at a different bank. My business is doing fine now, no thanks to you. David took a deep breath. I'm glad you found help somewhere else, and I'm glad your business is succeeding. But I want you to know that I made a mistake when I reviewed your application. I didn't give it the attention and consideration it deserved. I'm sorry for that. The man was quiet for so long that David thought he had hung up. Then, do you know how that felt? Being told I wasn't good enough. I had perfect credit. I had a solid business plan. But you looked at me like I was wasting your time. You're right, David said. I did, and I was wrong. I can't change what happened, but I can apologize and try to do better going forward. The conversation ended soon after. The man did not yell, but he did not forgive David either. He just said he had to go and hung up. David sat at his desk feeling terrible, but he picked up the phone and called the next person on the list. That week, David made 20 phone calls. Some people were angry. Some were hurt. Some had moved on and did not want to talk to him. A few agreed to meet with him to review their applications again. Each conversation was difficult. Each one forced David to face what he had done. But each one also taught him something about the real impact of his decisions. These were not just files on a computer. They were people with dreams, families to support, businesses they believed in. On Friday afternoon, David met with Maya for their weekly check-in. How was your week? Maya asked. Hard, David admitted. Really hard. Some of the people I called were still angry about being rejected. Hearing how I made them feel? It was painful. Good, Maya said. And David looked at her in surprise. I don't mean I'm glad you hurt people. I mean it's good that you felt the weight of your actions. If it was easy, you wouldn't really be learning. She asked him about the training materials, about what surprised him, what challenged his thinking. David talked about what he had learned about bias and privilege. Maya listened carefully, asking questions, pushing him to think deeper. Next week, you start your reassignment, Maya said. You'll be working with Mr. Chen in our small business development department. He specializes in helping minority-owned businesses. You will shadow him, learn from him, and assist with his clients. David nodded. He was nervous, but also strangely hopeful. For the first time in weeks, he felt like maybe he could become the person he should have been all along. 6 months later, David sat across from a young Latino man named Carlos who was nervously explaining his business idea. Carlos wanted to open a small restaurant that served his grandmother's traditional recipes. He had worked in kitchens for 10 years, saved money carefully, and found a good location. Now he needed a loan to cover the lease deposit, equipment, and initial supplies. David listened carefully, taking notes, asking thoughtful questions. What was Carlos's experience in restaurant management? Who was his target customer base? Had he done market research? What were his projected costs and revenues for the first year? Carlos answered each question, his confidence growing as David showed genuine interest. He had brought a detailed business plan, financial projections, letters from potential customers who had tried his food at community events, and proof of his savings and credit history. When Carlos finished his presentation, David spent time reviewing all the documents. He did not rush. He looked at the numbers carefully, read through the business plan, checked the credit report. Everything looked solid. "Your financials are strong," David said. "Your business plan is well thought out. Your experience in the restaurant industry is excellent. I think this is a very promising application." Carlos's eyes widened with hope. "Really?" "Really," David confirmed. "I'll need to submit this to the loan committee for final approval, but I'm confident they'll agree." "Your numbers speak for themselves." Carlos smiled, relief washing over his face. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I was worried. I've heard stories about how hard it is for people like me to get loans." David felt a familiar pang in his chest. "Stories like that existed because of people like he used to be. You deserve a fair chance," David said. "And based on what you've shown me, you've earned this loan." After Carlos left, David sat back in his chair and thought about how different this meeting was from the one 6 months ago with Maya. Back then, he had judged her in seconds without looking at her qualifications. Today, he had carefully reviewed every detail of Carlos's application, seeing the person and the potential rather than making assumptions. The past 6 months had been the hardest and most important of David's life. Working with Mr. Chen in the small business development department had opened his eyes to a world he had never really understood. He met entrepreneurs from all backgrounds: Black, Hispanic, Asian, immigrants, women, people who faced obstacles David had never had to think about. He heard stories of people being turned down by multiple banks despite having strong applications. He learned about the extra scrutiny minority business owners faced, the subtle discrimination, the way people made assumptions based on appearance or accent or neighborhood. David had also met people who succeeded despite all these obstacles. A Black woman who started a successful cleaning service with nothing but determination and hard work. An immigrant from Nigeria who built a thriving import business. A young Asian couple who opened a bakery that became beloved in the community. These people taught David something important. Talent, hard work, and good ideas existed everywhere. But opportunity did not. Too many qualified people never got the chance they deserved because someone like the old David dismissed them without really looking. The training had been difficult too. David had to confront uncomfortable truths about himself and society. He learned that bias was not just about hate or bad intentions. It was about the unconscious associations people made, the stereotypes they absorbed from culture and media, the patterns of thinking they never questioned. He learned that privilege meant not having to think about things that others faced constantly. He had never worried about whether a loan officer would judge him by his race. He had never felt the sting of being dismissed before he even spoke. That ignorance had made him blind to how his actions affected others. The weekly meetings with Maya continued. At first, David had dreaded them, but over time, they became valuable conversations about growth and change. Maya challenged him constantly, asked hard questions, made him think deeper. She also acknowledged when he made progress, which meant more than David expected. David had also completed his calls to all 47 people he had wrongly denied. 8 of them agreed to have their applications reviewed again. 5 ended up qualifying for loans once David looked at their materials fairly. One of them, a Black woman named Jasmine who started an online clothing boutique, sent David a thank you card when her business hit its first year of successful operation. The card sat on David's desk as a reminder. It showed the real impact of fair treatment, not just for the bank's numbers, but for actual human lives. One Friday afternoon, Maya came to David's desk instead of calling him to her office. "Walk with me," she said. They walked through the bank and out to the small park across the street. It was a beautiful autumn day, leaves turning gold and red. "I've been reviewing your work," Maya said as they sat on a bench. "Your loan decisions over the past 6 months show no signs of bias. Your approval rates are fair across all demographics. Your clients consistently report feeling respected and heard." David felt a weight lift off his shoulders. "I'm trying. Every day I'm trying to do better." "I can see that," Maya said. "The question is, do you feel different? Not just in how you act, but in how you think." David considered this carefully. "Yes, I notice my assumptions now. When I meet someone, I catch myself making quick judgments and I stop and question them. I ask myself, is this based on real information or just bias? I listen more. I look at people as individuals, not as representatives of a group. He paused, watching leaves fall from a nearby tree. I'm also more aware of how much I didn't know. About what it's like to face discrimination, to be judged unfairly, to work twice as hard for the same opportunities. I can't fix the past, but I can be better now. Maya nodded. That's real growth, David. Not many people would have done the work you did. Most would have quit and blamed me for being too harsh. I thought about quitting, David admitted, many times. But I'm glad I didn't. I needed to face what I did. I needed to change. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Maya said something unexpected. I'm moving you back to the main loan department. Full responsibilities, all types of loans. David looked at her in surprise. You think I'm ready? Rachel will still review your decisions monthly, just as a safety measure. But yes, I think you're ready. More importantly, I think you'll be a valuable teacher for others. You understand bias from the inside now. You can help other employees recognize it in themselves. David felt both honored and terrified. What if I mess up again? You probably will, Maya said honestly. Nobody is perfect. But the difference is, now you'll recognize it when it happens. You'll catch yourself, question your thinking, and make it right. That's all anyone can ask. She stood up, preparing to head back to the bank. One more thing. I'm starting a mentorship program for minority-owned businesses. I'd like you to participate. Share your perspective, help people navigate the loan process, be an advocate for fair treatment. David stood too. I'd be honored. As they walked back, David thought about how much had changed. 6 months ago, he had been confident, comfortable, blind to his own faults. Now he was humbler, more aware, still learning. The work was not finished. It would never be completely finished. But he was moving in the right direction. That evening, David met with a young black entrepreneur named Aisha who wanted to start a tutoring service. As she explained her plan, David listened intently. He asked questions, reviewed her materials carefully, saw the intelligence and preparation she brought to the table. When the meeting ended, David approved her application. As Aisha left with tears of gratitude in her eyes, David felt something he had not felt in a long time. Pride in his work, not because he had power over who got loans, but because he had used that power fairly. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, his wife. How was your day? David typed back, good, really good. I'll tell you about it when I get home. He looked around the bank, at the diverse customers and employees, at the community they served. This was what banking should be. Not gatekeeping and judgment, but opportunity and fairness. Not assumptions and bias, but open minds and open doors. David had learned an important truth. Everyone deserved to be seen for who they truly were, not for who someone assumed them to be. It was a lesson that came at a high cost, but it was worth it. He was finally the person he should have been all along. Not perfect, not finished growing, but trying every day to be better. And that, David realized, was what really mattered. As he packed up his desk at the end of the day, David looked at Jasmine's thank you card one more time. Then he added a note to himself, a reminder he would carry forward. See people first. Judge fairly. Give everyone the chance you would want for yourself. It was a simple principle, but it changed everything.